Hello and welcome to my morning note. If ever there was a case of a country falling really drastically out of favour, it's Brazil at the moment. Of course, it's going to be hosting the next World Cup and the Olympics, but now both Brazilians and foreign investors are beginning to think that there are better uses for big infrastructure dollars than shiny new stadiums. The stock market has drastically underperformed virtually every other market in the world, and the popularity of the president, Dilma Rousseff, has suddenly sunk like a stone. Is this all perhaps overdone? Could this perhaps be creating a buying opportunity in Brazil? With me now to discuss this is our former Brazil bureau chief, now Deputy Emerging Markets Editor, Jonathan Wheatley. Jonathan, thanks very much for joining me today. Let's start by taking a look at exactly how much Brazil can both out and underperform the rest of the world. Blue line shows you how Brazil's stock market has done compared to the rest of the world since President Lula took office. It's a time when everybody thought that Brazil was about to go to the dogs. Yeah. And then the red line shows comparison to Mexico, the other big Latin American economy. Yeah. Does this begin to suggest that it's time now to buy Brazil after such a precipitous fall?
It looks like it, doesn't it? A huge build-up and an enormous drop-off at the end. But what's behind that, strangely for Brazil, is that when you look at the value of stocks, the relation of the price to earnings ratio, how much they're selling at in terms of relation to their projected forward earnings, they're not actually that cheap at the moment, and neither have they ever really been that rich. Right. Brazilian stocks in PE terms trade in a fairly narrow margin compared to the rest of the world. They're about twice as rich as the EM average at the moment, for example. And that's part of the problem in Brazil, that stocks in a way, in this way, are a very good indicator of what's going on in the economy, and that is that despite its years of boom and bust, Brazil is really, on average, stuck in a pretty narrow range of not very satisfactory growth. It never risks falling off a cliff. It never really gets going. It's stuck in this sort of something close to mediocrity.
Okay, that's a fascinating point. Let's take a look at how investment has gone since 2002, which is again when the current Labour Party administration first got into office. Mm-hmm. Does seem remarkable that we're basically stuck with levels of fixed capital investment which are no higher now than they were in 1995. What's going on?
It does seem extraordinary, doesn't it? And this is an index which was at a pretty low base from the very beginning. Brazil invests 18, 19, sometimes gets close to 20% of GDP in things like factories and buildings that actually drive productivity. An emerging market like Brazil, if it's going to grow, really needs to be at least up in the mid-20s, and it has never really been able to do it. There was build-up in the good years before the crisis, and then a drop and a huge recovery, but we're now back to where we were. And this is the big problem that faces Brazilian companies. Right. How can they increase productivity in an environment which is not only one of low investment, but of other bureaucratic problems and bottlenecks?
And presumably it suggests that the protesters have a point, given the ridiculous amounts of money that are being paid on all these beautiful stadiums around the country.
The protesters have a point. I was in Brazil a couple of weeks ago, and what was fascinating was I met a load of business leaders, and they were all cheering these protesters on, because for them this was a chance for the message to get through that what Brazil needs is better governance, better bang for its buck, and better productivity. The problem is they've known that for a long time. They just haven't been able to do it.
And let's just ask politically, Dilma is obviously in a lot of trouble at the moment, very suddenly. Is there anything she could do that would both appease the people on the streets and appease the business community beyond fixing this investment problem?
There's a shopping list of things she could do. Whether she's able to do them or not is another matter. Brazilian politics is very messy. I checked this morning, there are 22 parties in Congress, 14 parties in the governing coalition. It's nothing like a one-party system that we're used to in the UK, US and other countries. It's very hard to get anything through Congress. Everybody has to support a measure, and even when they do, tax reform, almost every politician in Brazil agrees on the need for tax reform. They still can't agree on how to do it because there are so many competing interests that lose or gain with every change in the system.
Okay, Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. Okay, it sounds as though our Brazilian experts are suggesting that no, there isn't a buying opportunity in Brazil yet. There are still too many risks out there. That great boom, I suspect, was driven largely by high commodity prices. Unless you're a bull on commodities, you should probably continue to be a bit of a bear on Brazil.